Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in. On this episode of the podcast, host Craig Jeffery catches up with Todd Yoder, Global Director of Treasury at Fluor Corporation, to discuss the experimentation and perspectives on newer technology. They take a closer look at how artificial intelligence and other innovative technologies, including RPA, machine learning, and other applications, are being leveraged to add profitable value to Treasury today. Listen into the discussion to find out more.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. This is Craig Jeffery. Today's topic is technology, experimentation, and perspectives. And once again, I'm joined with Todd Yoder from Fluor Corporation. Todd, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Craig, for inviting me back to your show.
Yeah, I know last time we had a good conversation, and I think we spent as much time afterwards talking about tech, which is what was the genesis for this follow-on podcast. So I'm glad you could make it. I wanted to cover a couple things. One was your perspectives on Treasury. Then I wanted to dive in a little bit onto RPA because you're doing some unique things there. And then talk about machine learning, that part of AI, or that separate section that talks about letting machines learn patterns and using that pattern for other activities. And then spend just a little bit of time on a couple projects you're working on. That's the general outline for the discussion. But I wanted to start with technology perspectives. You have a lot of different ways of stating how you look at things, how you value technology. What is your approach to justifying technology in your organization? So maybe you just tell me a little bit about how do you look at technology? What guides you in that thought?
So I listened to your recent podcast, number 99, when you were talking about Treasury technology. It reminded me of the quote that it's not the strongest or the most intelligent that survive, it's the most adaptive that survive. And so I think as treasurers, we need to be open-minded and we need to be adaptive. So Treasury technology for me, I'm very fortunate. Our treasurer at Fluor Corporation is what I call tech smart. So he's extremely intelligent all around. He runs global tax as well. But from a tech perspective, he's very smart and he's very supportive of the Treasury organization when it comes to the use of technology and how we can add value to the business. Artificial intelligence, just to touch on that real quick, artificial intelligence to me, I think of AGI or ASI or deep AI. So more of a machine being as intelligent as a human, and on into, a lot of the talk is around consciousness. So everyone has a different understanding. For me, when I hear AI, or when I think of AI in a Treasury application, I think of machine learning, which also encompasses deep learning, but machine learning is where I really focus my time and energy on understanding and learning how the technology works.
I want to talk about perspectives on jobs, positions, and the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned that those are most adaptive, or those that survive or do well. What's your perspective on jobs? As you bring in more technology, some tech makes life a little easier, some replaces a lot of tasks. What's your view on tech, especially some of these newer tech, on jobs and careers even?
I say if I had $1 for every time I heard somebody when they're referencing automation or RPA in general saying that we're not going to reduce headcount, it won't take jobs, it'll just change the jobs that we do. I think that I don't believe that for a minute. I mean, in the short run, in a small treasury organization, I could see that RPA automation offering an opportunity for less repetitive work, for more cognitive work. But on a larger scale, across a finance organization, across a large company, automation, RPA will definitely change the way we work in the future. RPA isn't just for repetitive tasks. There's a lot of different functionality that RPA is good for within the Treasury organization. I know you mentioned return on investment for technology, and I was speaking at an event last summer in Miami, and on the topic of RPA and automation, and an audience member had a question on the ROI for RPA. I think this is an area where we want to be careful, because if you look at a specific project or process, within Treasury, and you look at, okay, what would it cost me to buy a license for RPA and to have a program developed, so you need a developer who can write the code for that. If you're looking on a project by project basis, it's probably not going to be a positive ROI. It's a technology that I think you adapt, and then you figure out as you start to use it how powerful it is and how many different applications you can use it for. It's kind of like thinking about email in the early 90s. If a company was an early adopter of email, they may not completely understand the breadth and depth of what email could, how it would change communications and organization, but they figured that out. So I think this is a technology that's super powerful. We want to be careful with the ROI up front. And then the other thing with RPA is, you don't want to take a bad process or procedure and automate it, because it's still a bad process or procedure. So I think, in the short run, treasurers can expect to spend a good amount of time, or their staff to spend a good amount of time going through whatever process or procedure that they're considering automating, just to have it fully documented, and so they can confirm, okay, we've got a great process here, but it is either very repetitive or there is an extreme amount of data, and so we can see the value in automating this process.
Those are helpful perspectives, right? You don't always know how you're going to use some of these powerful tools until you gain some experience, and that really leads us into the next section about robotic process automation, or RPA. You've been working on gaining experience at this. I remember the last time we talked, you were working through some courses, some type of designation. You were also building some things. I don't know if they were real applications or just test cases to gain facility with RPA. I'd love to hear what you're doing and what you've been learning from maybe more than dabbling in RPA, maybe being more diligent in learning some of the tools for that.
As a treasurer, I don't plan on changing my career path, and honestly, I don't think I'd make a good data scientist, but I wanted to, and so I don't plan on doing any actual coding. I may do a little just for fun, but I wanted to finish the courses to get the certificate RPA developer, just to better understand what can be done and what can't be done. So from a high level, you have attended bots and you have unattended bots. So I know you're familiar with this technology. Attended bots, think of it running from a desktop, and unattended bots maybe running from a server that kicks itself off.
I'll give a brief definition of robotic process automation. You're welcome to add on to that, and then I want to get into some additional questions for you. Robotic process automation, it's a set of tools oftentimes run at the enterprise level, or hopefully run at the enterprise level, that for the most part allows you to automate the handoff of data between systems, or the aggregation, the cleansing, the prep of data, taking these steps primarily between two systems. Not, most tools have some type of automation built into them, and you can use those. But this helps with the handoffs. Is that how you would explain RPA to another layperson?
Definitely. RPA is, if you think of it, to start, just think of it as a human, that if you think of an attended bot that's working from your desktop. So an easy way to think about it is, processes where you log into different cloud solutions, extract data or pull down reports, and then take that information and assimilate it, and then it's part of additional processes and procedures.
Now, a lot of RPA, the negative side of RPA is that it can break more easily than, let's say, an API connection between systems, right? Someone changes something and the RPA process may not work so well. Is that one of the limitations you see, or you see other limitations or items that have to be compensated for?
Yeah, I think RPA is actually easier. It's more transparent, in my opinion. If you have an API wired up and something breaks with that API, I think that is probably more challenging than RPA. Like when our treasury bot runs, I get emails on what has been completed successfully and if there's anything that hasn't been completed successfully. And so you can go to a log in a dashboard and see where something got hung up. And so again, I haven't invested the time. I don't have the time to do the coding to recode to fix that, but I have someone on the RPA team that can do that. And so it's not difficult. I think there's very good transparency with RPA now. Depending on what you build out and how complicated it becomes, it may get a little more tricky. But APIs, and I'm interested in your thoughts on APIs as well, but the way I think about them is an electrical outlet, right? And so if you think of the electricity as data, you need specific data from specific departments within an organization. If you're able to plug in to that data and pull what you need for other applications and other uses, then that's where the win is. And I rely heavily myself on Bloomberg APIs. I think they were building those out long ago, and they work very well. I know we've talked about Amazon and Jeff Bezos and his strategy with APIs, 10 years ago when he told his staff that if you're not using an API and you're creating data in the organization, then you're fired. And that was like 10 years ago. So he's done really well with that strategy. If you're going to create data, build an API, and so that data can be accessed, and you can control what data is accessed and who has certain permissions through your API that you build out for your data. And so I think that will be the future, and with data infrastructures, we'll be having that data accessed. And I know you're probably closer to open banking and PSD2 and how APIs are being used there to get data, but interested kind of in your thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, some APIs have been around for a while. Some of the open banking APIs we're using the term open treasury a lot of times now. Some of them are still new in some ways that, organizations are rolling them out. Some of the trillion-dollar banks are farther along than others. And then the early days, you're running into some capacity issues where it times out because, you're transferring thousands of items for balance reporting there, and they're working those things to make sure the tolerances work. And then you have to have some other growing pains where, we need to keep this secure, so we're resetting the password every 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. And then the API setup has to be adapted and changed to account for those different elements. So some of those are the early learning pains, but they're pretty useful. It's allowing for more creativity and development in a secure way. And I like that type of connection in many ways, like for getting data, some ways better than RPA, but APIs don't handle everything that RPA can do. So there's going to be a combination of those methods of moving, checking, validating, loading data across the enterprise or extra enterprise. So those are two big types of tech that people should be aware of in Treasury. To your point about being aware and being adaptive are are some of the key elements there. So that's some of my thinking on that. And before I move on to another topic, you went to go get a certification. And you've been studying that. Who would you recommend taking that type of effort to gain a certification to have a certain level of facility and knowledge about that?
As a treasurer, I think maybe it's a little overdone on my part to spend the time, call it 25 hours of time to get the certification. I don't think a treasurer would need to do that, but I do think it would be a good investment, for someone on the team, the treasury team, to get the certification and be able to assimilate that to the treasurer so that they have a good understanding of the technology and how it works. It's going to be more of you have an RPA team, you have developers on that team, you have architects, and then the subject matter experts from around the business will engage with that team in order to build out their bot for whatever project it is that they're working on.
Yeah, Todd, I wanted to shift over to machine learning, and I want to see where you see the value in machine learning. What are some of the applications for that? Our view is, you may have a different view here, but let me just set the stage for that. Is our view is that over the next couple of years, the majority of machine learning applications are going to be handled, managed within a system. So a vendor-provided system will have that type of capability. It'll be more spoon-fed, maybe not spoon-fed is the right term, but more self-service oriented for work within the system to attack and look at the data that's coming into a single system. And over time, so we think that's going to be where most of it sits. Over time, it will become more cross systems, perhaps. You've spent time, or at least some of your time, working on and using open source tools for machine learning, where it's not sitting solely within an application. But I wanted to, where do you see the value of machine learning, and do you agree with that outlook for where the majority of development will happen? Are we missing opportunities if that's the case? Yeah, why don't you go from there?
I've just been working on open source programming language for a couple years now, but so I didn't grow up on a different technology that is now irrelevant or not as prominent. But I started using Python, and the live demo I did in Denmark last October for a group of treasurers. I showed the audience, it's a live demonstration, and so how to install Python in Anaconda to use the Conda technology, and how to use a Jupyter notebook and build pandas data frames, and scikit-learn is another training, testing, learn, predict. It deals with linear and logistical regressions, and then for data visualization, matplotlib and plotly. So what I did there was looked at different currency pairs and forward exchange rates, interest rate differentials, and volatility of the currency pairs, and then used pandas and plotly for pandas for the calculations, but plotly for some data visualization. It wasn't a super intense project, but it was a lot of fun to do it, and to present it live was fun. And so there was a group of treasurers there that, I don't know how many, but I got a lot of questions after the presentation. So I think there's definitely interest in it. What I tried to show them was just how easy it is to get started, and showed them GitHub and how you can get some stuff to run to kind of understand how it works. But stage 2 of the project that I've been working on with machine learning will have some cross-validation to include nonlinear relationships, and then in-sample and out-of-sample data, so that I can test the predictive power as compared to what you would do with general back testing. So that's kind of stage 2 of it, and I plan to work on that when I have time to do so. But I think it's going to be fun, and I think it'll add a different perspective. But overall, I would say open source programming language. I would agree with you, Craig, that our service providers, they have the R&D, and they've invested in building out machine learning into their applications. And I think we'll see a lot more investments there by the service providers. But at the same time, I think, with the younger generation, especially in the Treasury organization, my daughter she's going to be a senior in college, and she's an infographic major, a business major, but studying infographics. And she's using open source programming languages and statistical application. So the next generation, this is going to be something that they're extremely familiar with and know how to use it, and the power that you can get. So I think we'll start to see, in addition to service providers, I think we'll start to see coders develop applications for corporates, and even within a corporate treasury. It wouldn't surprise me if there is more and more of treasury folks that see how easy it is to use open source programming languages and build out some models. We build financial models all the time, right? So it's nothing new, and I think it just gives you more power than what you can get trying to do things in Excel and just running macros. So definitely opportunity in the future there.
Yeah, Todd, thanks so much for just talking through some of the projects you're working on. They're exciting. I like how you dropped in a bunch of the data visualization, data lakes, all those kind of exciting things. We have one project we thought we were going to use a data lake, but we found that we were going to use an Azure data blob because it was one click to provision what we needed in a data blob versus a lot of setup for a data lake. So we got to use we've been able to use a blob for the same type of application that a data lake would have. But that's a little bit of a discursus there. Todd, as we wrap up, any final thoughts or advice that you'd have to those who are looking at gaining some skill and facility with some of these newer tools?
Yeah, I would say be adaptive. You don't have to be the strongest or the most intelligent, but be adaptive, and like we talked about on a previous podcast, be a learner and learn these technologies, be familiar with them. You don't have to be the subject matter expert, but take the time to understand them and how they, and you'll be better prepared in the future for how they change treasury and finance, and how you can utilize them to add value to the organization.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.